Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views we hope are relevant to you. In today's show, we take a look at the petition to reopen the Air India bombing investigation and how you can get involved. Californian Sikhs living in fear of the threat from India speak out once again. In the Punjab, Sikhs are being completely ignored as India renegotiates access to the final resting place of the first Guru with Pakistan. And after almost 7 years to the day in prison without conviction, Jagtar Singh Johal's brother meets the British government once again to press for action against India. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. Don't forget to keep your comments coming. Let us know where you're watching us from because we love to see where it is.
Indeed we do, and together James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as usual, of course, we'll be taking a look at lots of your great comments at the end of the show, which you've been very kindly filling up beneath our videos. So James, let's move the show along. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
A horrifying story out of India, Angus. It's just really sad that a 17-year-old boy has lost his life over a decades-old battle over land. It is just unheard of. The whole incident, as I said, has been going on where several individuals from a village have been arguing and fighting over a small part of land in the area. And today, or well, actually, I guess it was yesterday, a young man by the name of Yadav, and he was clearing some of that land. And when he was doing so, the other individuals whom the dispute is with came over to the land. A big argument and confrontation ensued, and a sword was used to actually behead the young 17-year-old boy. He was just doing what he thought he should be doing and clearing the land and taking care of it. And it turned out that these individuals just swung that sword with such strength that they literally removed his head from his body. His poor mother was terrified and just beside herself, and actually picked up the young man's head and held it in her lap as she sobbed with sorrow and devastation for several hours. So let's take a look at the story here, Angus, in a bit more detail. Now, this is coming in and been confirmed by Superintendent of Police Ajay Paul Sharma. And as I said, this land dispute's been going back several decades and is currently actually in the civil court process of settlement to find out or to find a resolution after all of these decades. The investigators will be requesting all of the documents in the criminal investigation as they move forward, and they actually are anticipating getting those records from the civil court in this investigation within a 3-day period. So they are moving very rapidly on this case. Now, it turns out that Ramesh Yadav, the son of Lalta Yadav, began clearing the disputed land this morning that flared up the tension, he said. And this is one of the investigators describing what had happened. During the confrontation, Ramesh attacked Anirudh Yadav's son, son of Ramjeet, with a sword and decapitated him. So again, this is two villagers known as Ramjeet Yadav and Lalta Yadav. They've been fighting over this for decades. And the son of one attacked the son of the other, and as I said, decapitating him. Just a horrible, horrible event. Not only did the police get dispatched once they got the call, and apparently emotions were running high, which is understandable in a small village between the families and, of course, the villagers in general. So the police dispatched several teams out to that location to try and calm emotions and to follow up and see what was going on. At the scene, they were able to arrest Lalta Yadav, but his son fled the scene, and at this time, he is still being searched for by the local police department. The regional magistrate also attended this scene and declared that those responsible will face the full extent of the law for such a brutal and senseless killing. As I said, the one father has been arrested and police are searching for his son who fled the scene of the attack. And right now he is in custody, the father, not the son. So it goes on that the Samajwadi president claims and his name is Akhilesh Yadav. He is the president of the other party, and he says that there is no law and order left in the state. He actually goes on to blame the BJP and Modi for this, which is very risky to say the least, in him coming out publicly and blaming the BJP and Modi for the lack of law and order in the state. His exact words were, "There is a strange contradictory relationship between today's government and crime. On one hand, both are together. On the other hand, the weaker and more inactive the government is becoming, the more powerful and active the criminals are becoming. Today's UP says we do not want the BJP." And that is very, very telling of the situation there. The BIM Army Chief, Chandra Shekhar, also condemned the attack while extending his condolences to the family of Anurag. And he posted this on X, formerly known as Twitter, and he stated, "The brutal murder of Taekwondo player Anurag Yadav in Jaipur, Uttar Pradesh is extremely sad and punishable. My condolences are with the family. May nature give them the strength to bear this immense loss." And he actually also attended the location and the scene of the crime. So it is, for a country that is bragging about them being the largest democracy in the world and that they follow the rule of law, they cannot seem to get a grip on the violence and the attitudes of people in these regions when a young 17-year-old boy can be beheaded and his poor mother distraught. And I can only imagine, I have 4 sons, and I can't even imagine the pain and anguish that she must be going through to witness such a horrific and just brutal attack, Angus.
Yeah, this is a horrible story. It's a horrific story, and it's deeply, deeply sad for all those involved. And I don't want to dwell on the details of the specific story because, as I say, it's a horrible story. But I think that the bigger picture story here is what we need to discuss, and that is there is this general trend of crime increase across certainly the peripheral parts of India. And one could argue that it has been, at the very best, acquiesced to. That is, it's been let happen by the central government. And you could take it a step further and say it's almost been encouraged by central government to let law and order break down in many of these areas of India. And it's interesting that, even locally, the issue has been politicised. The local representatives are blaming the BJP for this. Now, they could be criticised for trying to politicise a horrific event, but in reality, it does point to a bigger problem right across India. This affects the Punjab that we talked about on a regular basis, but it does affect many of these other regions. Certainly outside the central cow belt of India, many of these regions are seeing an increase in violence, an increase in really bad crime. And this isn't just, of course, it's just low-level crime that happens on a daily basis. It's this really significant violent crime, and of course the sexual violence against women, which we're reported on regularly. But serious crime like this is on the increase, and the government. Really, the buck has to stop with the government. And unfortunately, as we have reported on many occasions, the Indian government, and this is cross-party, it's not just the BJP, although the BJP are very, very much guilty of this. They are harbouring many of their own criminals, and therefore these members of the Indian Parliament, of the Lok Sabha, who are charged and have been convicted with all sorts of very high-level crimes, including crimes of violence against women. That is the example they are setting to the Indian population. And what they're saying, the message it's sending out to the Indian population, is it's okay to break the law. Even if you break the law, you can still become an MP, you can still become a member of our nation's government. That's the message being sent out to the grassroots of the country, and the people around India are saying, well, if politicians are allowed to be criminals, then why can't we? Let's go out there and cause all sorts of violence. So this is what's happening, and unfortunately the extent of that, by implication, this extends out just into the day-to-day lives of ordinary people in India across these regions like Uttar Pradesh. And they say, yeah, it's okay to pick up a machete or sword or whatever it was and go and wreak violence on another family, on another neighbouring family. That's the low level of attitude of violence across these regions in India. So yeah, it's an unforgivable act, but one has to always point the finger of guilt. The ultimate responsibility lies with the government. Whether it's BJP, Congress or whoever, the government need to set the example. They need to stamp down, they need to make it a cultural norm that violence is not okay, that violence does not belong in a civilized society. And if India is to enter, as we keep calling it, the top table of the world, it cannot display everyday violence like this. This is a horrific act. It's just unimaginable. And as I say, James, the buck stops, in my personal opinion, the buck stops with the government on this one.
Absolutely, Angus. And there's the old saying that some things, and I think this applies to India as well, when people refer to things as too big to fail, I think quite the opposite in this situation of law and order throughout India is that they are failing as a result of being too big. And I think that if there was the formation and respect of Khalistan among other regions breaking off to have more control over their own laws, over their own destiny, I honestly believe that India as a whole and its new neighbors would be much better off and be able to control things much easier than one central system in Delhi. But that's, again, my opinion on that. As a father, I just am horrified to see these types of stories coming out, whether it's India or anywhere else in the world, Angus. It's horrific. And on that note, as we talk about tragedies and devastating losses, there's an important petition going on in Canada that many of our viewers should be aware of, but many are probably not. And that has to do with the reopening of an inquiry into the devastating air terror attacks in 1985 of Air India Flight 182. Now, there is a petition on the Government House of Commons website, and this closes on December the 11th. So it's very important that I encourage all Canadians to sign this petition. You can do so easily, and I'm going to show you after we go through the story here how quickly and easily you can actually just sign the petition if you are a Canadian resident, permanent resident that is, or a Canadian citizen. Now, although we are mostly dealing with a Sikh audience here on our show, I've actually gone as far as to say every single Canadian should be signing this. It was the worst air disaster in Canadian history that took the life of 331 victims, and that included 268 Canadians, 27 British citizens, as well as 22 Indians. And this is and still lingers because of the way the investigation was handled, the loss of evidence by the RCMP and intelligence agencies, the way that certain individuals were investigated and charged in this case, and later were actually were let off of the charges, or one other individual that was involved did plead guilty, and that was Inderjit Singh Rayat in 2003. But the other individuals were acquitted of charges, including Talwinder Singh Parmar. Now, these issues, especially with the ongoing information and new information that's coming out, it seems every day, of India's transnational repression and their foreign interference, it is more and more essential that we get to the bottom of the Air India disaster. Now, with this said, of course, Gurpreet Singh of Delta, British Columbia, moved to have this petition added back in, I believe it was August that this petition started. So it has several thousand signatures so far, but we need much, much more than that. And it just amazes me that there haven't been more. But I think that a part of it too has been the lack of publicity on the campaign to get this petition into Parliament and into the House of Commons. So again, you'll see at the bottom, we'll have a link to the website where you can go and sign the petition. And once more, we need to get to the bottom of the worst air terror attack in Canada. Now, on June the 23rd, 1985, for those who are not really familiar with it, which I don't know how you couldn't be, but again, I come from a different generation where I was in school when this happened and still remember it very clearly. And the flight, although went from Montreal, London, Delhi to Mumbai, it also had a Vancouver connection where the individuals charged were from Vancouver. In addition, they accuse the individuals that were charged of planning of doing everything from Vancouver and then flying from Vancouver to Montreal to make that flight overseas. Now, the flight did not quite make it. It was the bomb ignited over the ocean just off the coast of Ireland. Or sorry, I believe it was actually Scotland, but regardless, it cost the lives of all those individuals. At the time, there is information that the investigators and intelligence agencies were actually instructed not to involve the government of India, the RAW agency and their spy agencies and other government agents, or secret agents as some refer them to, or refer as them. They were told not to include them in the investigation, regardless as to where the evidence was leading. Now, those accusations and insinuations are essential for the cause of having this matter reopened. Now, on both sides of the argument, there are a lot of very emotional feelings on this. Of course, there are a lot of people who don't want to reopen the wounds, who lost family members and those that they loved in this horrible tragedy. On the other side, people want the truth. They want to know what happened and who was ultimately responsible for the bombing of that flight and the other events that happened on that tragic day. Now, of course, at the end of the day, it's important that all of the information is released, that it is transparent, and that people are held to account, regardless as to where the chips may fall. It's important that we get to the truth. Now, here on the petition, it just outlines the Air India bombing of June 23rd, 1985, that left 331 people dead, was the worst tragedy in the history of aviation terror before 9/11. Next point, the victims' families continue to wait for justice and closure. And I think that is the biggest thing for all Canadians. We need justice, we need closure, and we need the truth. And it goes on to say that the Sikhs in Canada widely believe that this was the handiwork of foreign intelligence to discredit their political activism and undermine their advocacy work for human rights in India. And it really needs to be reiterated to people that at that time there was a lot of turmoil. There was a Sikh genocide. There was just so much going on in India, and so many reasons why the Indian government had motivation to do such an act. The recent developments with the Sikh community in British Columbia give credence to this perception, and that was at the time of this part being written. However, since that time, of course, we know of many other extrajudicial killings or other attempted assassinations of foreign citizens on foreign soil, and so much more foreign interference by the government of India. So again, it's so important now that the truth is coming out about India and their agents, that we look back and get to the bottom of this tragedy. There's other information here that goes on about that, and then also about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau standing up in the legislature, the parliament, to address the potential involvement of India in these different things, including the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar on September the 18th, 2023. So I encourage all Canadians, again, no matter what religion, no matter what, where you've come from, this is a part of Canadian history that we need to have written as the truth. We need that truth out there, and you can see here on the screen the link to the petition. So please make sure that you do that. You can also just search Petition 5100 on the www.ourcommons.ca website, and that will bring it up as well. So again, it's so easy for you to go ahead and do that. And I'll show you a quick video about how simple it is to get your name included on this petition. It is, as easy as can be. It's easier than signing into your own email for that part. So let's just take a quick peek here, and I'll show you how quick and how simple it is. Good day, folks. It's James here with Perspectives on Satellite TV. As you may know, there is a petition going on for the Canada House of Commons to reopen an inquiry into the devastating impacts and investigation of those responsible in relation to Air India Flight 182. That was the worst act of terror in Canadian history. This took place in June of 1985. However, the truth has still not been fully disclosed, and there's been inconsistencies with the investigation. So there is a proposal right now and petition that is being signed by Canadians and Canadian residents to reopen the inquiry. I wanted to take a moment to show you just how quick and easy it is to sign this petition so that the truth of Flight 182 can finally be known around the world. As I said, this happened in June of 1985, and this petition deadline is December the 11th to reopen the investigation and the inquiry. So you just go to the site here at ourcommons.ca/petitions. It's petition E5100, and you just click on it. You enter your information. And I am a citizen. I acknowledge and understand, and I wish to receive email updates. Sign. That is how quick and easy it is as a Canadian citizen and a Canadian resident to fill in the online petition and to have your signature counted. And all that you have to do is go ahead and check your email to confirm so that the signature process is complete. So I hope that you will join me in demanding that the truth is finally investigated and released to the Canadian public about the worst aviation disaster and terror attack in Canadian history. Thank you. So again, it takes just 30 seconds to go on there to sign the petition, and then I'll go to your email to just confirm that it is you that did that. And again, I can't explain or emphasize how important it is, Angus, for us to get to the bottom of what happened that June day of 1985.
Indeed, it's. I really do urge everybody in Canada, if you're a Canadian citizen resident there, just get out there and get this signed, because this whole situation has always left more questions than answers. Clearly, there is so much more to this story than has been released into the public domain. And there are so many different dynamics going on. We know the intelligence services have been heavily involved in this whole story. And of course, the poor families who've suffered from this incident and still suffer even today from the legacy of this. Of course, it's very hard to reopen these wounds, but ultimately, they must know that if somebody else was responsible for this dreadful incident, they must find out the truth. Because if it is uncovered that in fact it was RAW, the Indian intelligence services behind this dreadful act, then of course you would want to know who was responsible for the death of your loved one or family member. So yeah, it's one wonders if even the Canadian government and the Canadian intelligence services don't really want to reopen this, because there may be a lot of uncomfortable truths even for Canada in this whole thing. But ultimately, it will only come through people power. And I've talked a lot about this in the past, is that grassroots activism really does work. We've seen it in so many different areas in the US, here in the UK, obviously in Canada as well. Just keep pushing, sign this petition, get out there and really pressure all your local political representatives. They must reopen this investigation, because if India were behind this, and you mustn't, I mean, don't forget, there's a lot of context here. This happened in June 1985. This is just 12 months after the dreadful attack on the Golden Temple in the Punjab. And also, as we reported, this also happened just 7 months after what would have been Operation Shanti. So if you look at it in the context of what India and the Indian government had been guilty of leading up to this dreadful bombing, they've been guilty of attacking the Golden Temple with the full force of the army, over 1,000 troops, tanks, armed vehicles, everything were sent to the most sacred site for the Sikh community. And then just a few months after that, in November 1984, Indira Gandhi was planning Operation Shanti, which the scope of that was enormous. It was potentially to firebomb and raze villages right across the Punjab to the ground, to massacre hundreds of thousands of Sikhs. That was Operation Shanti, that was fortunately prevented by Beyant and Satwant Singh. But that was the scale and the scope and the ambitions of RAW and the Indian government at that time. 7 months later, what was just an aircraft bombing? It was nothing in the context of that. In other words, they were easily capable and ambitious enough to launch a false flag operation like this bombing. So it is very possible, and indeed very likely, that the Indian intelligence services, and by extension the Indian government, were responsible for the Air India bombing. And we will only ever get that truth out if we can at least open a new investigation. So if you're in Canada in the audience, please don't just sign this petition. Get out there and get as many people as you can possibly talk to also sign this. It's people power that will do it, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I just wanted to close that off with reading the quick statement that was released this year on the anniversary by the Dave Taboul, who's the Pacific Region Commander for the Federal Policing of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So just quickly, the RCMP offers our deepest sympathies, understanding, and support to the families of the victims of Air India Flight 182. The impacts of the greatest terror-related loss of life involving and affecting Canadians in our country's history have not diminished over time. The trauma caused by the bombing on June 23, 1985 has impacted generations. The Air India investigation is the longest and certainly one of the most complex domestic terrorism investigations that the RCMP has undertaken in our history. Our investigative efforts remain active and ongoing, which I thought was important to point out. This year marks the 39th anniversary memorial and the 40th memorial, a significant milestone approaching in 2025. At the memorials, previous and current employees from the investigation and our greater organization, past and present, will ensure we remember those lost and those left to deal with the unthinkable. Over the years, attending the memorials have been an opportunity to pay our respects to the victims and their families and show their appreciation for all those that did so much to respond and investigate the tragedy. We encourage you to do the same in private or at memorials in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. We must never forget those innocent lives lost to this tragedy and acts of terrorism. So that was the release by the RCMP just prior to this year's memorial, which we covered as well, Angus.
Indeed. So as I said, yeah, please get out there, get that petition signed, and urge as many people as you can talk to also sign it as well. Yeah. Very important that that gets pushed, because clearly everybody wants the truth in that one. Okay, let's move on now to my first story, and we've talked a lot about Sikhs being targeted in the Americas by Indian transnational repression. Well, the Sacramento Bee, they produced a really interesting story just a couple of weeks ago that we did report on at the time about how this transnational repression has taken many forms. Well, again, it's very much a sign of how the whole issue is actually reaching the mainstream media, and certainly it's extending outside just the Sikh community circles, and shall we say that the Sikh media is also, it is hitting the mainstream media. And the Sacramento Bee has actually published another article just in the last couple of days, and this was written by Dr. Pritpal Singh. And Dr. Pritpal Singh, he's the founder of the American Sikh Caucus Committee. They've been heavily involved in this whole push for the Transnational Repression Act. They've been involved in the recent inquiries into transnational repression, etc., etc. So he's a very active campaigner for all these issues. He himself came to the US after the genocide of 1984, as many people did. And he's written just a fairly general article in the Sacramento Bee again, but once again, it just highlights obviously the issues at hand, but it also highlights the fact of just, again, how mainstream these issues are becoming. And ordinary people outside the Sikh community are now reading about these things. They are seeing these. It's becoming very visible, which in turn is making more people aware of it. Now, this article is actually is headed by a nice photo of Jasmeet Bains, the Assemblywoman, who's been very heavily involved in a lot of politics benefiting the Sikh community. And it shows her and others on this huge 300-odd mile walk through California to highlight the genocide, and they call it the Fearless for Justice March. So well done to them for doing that. Now, the article itself, I'll just cherry pick a few elements of this, but again, and just to remind you, this is bringing out these issues to the mainstream. And Dr. Singh talks about this drive-by shooting that happened earlier in August that targeted Sikh American advocate Satinder Pal Singh Raju. And he talks about how it sent shockwaves through the local community, underscoring the ongoing threats we face. This incident, now the subject of state and federal investigations, reveals a disturbing pattern. Even here in California, Sikhs are being attacked for their religious and political views, with connections tracing back to India. So again, it's highlighting the fact that of all places, California, this wonderful sunny land of the free, etc., even there in California, Sikhs live in fear on a daily basis. And they experienced it firsthand with this recent shooting of Satinder Pal Singh Raju. And Dr. Singh continues that a Sacramento Bee investigation published earlier this month talked about the threats, and this is, if you remember, the soft transnational repression. And he says, the piece gave my family and me chills. Twice in the past year, my home security cameras have captured what appeared to be surveillance of my home in Fremont. My son was targeted during the same period by two people impersonating federal agents. This is serious stuff. This is just an ordinary Sikh family living in California. These are the things that are happening to them on a daily basis. This is intimidation and harassment of the scariest type. Meanwhile, a man identifying himself as an Indian government agent attempted to coerce the priest at our local Gurdwara to surveil the activities of worshippers, a blatant act of intimidation and a threat to the entire congregation. So again, this is Hindutva and Indian agents trying to get involved in the local Gurdwara, in the local community, so they can watch and report back to India the movements of people. And this is how Nijar was murdered, by, again, this same sort of surveillance from India. So India are still at it. This is what they're still doing. Now, the recent Bee article makes clear that violence isn't the only threat we face. One-sided, distorted insinuations about Sikh Americans were dressed up by the Hindu American Foundation. Here we are again, the HAF, this RSS Hindutva organisation, massively funded, who have this sort of front of this respectable front. They call themselves a foundation. And in fact, they're just a front for the RSS. They are a front for Hindutva forces. They're a front for transnational oppression. And some elected officials to serve, talk about the HAF, who've been training and offering training material to local law enforcement so they can target and surveil the local Sikh community. Yeah. Now, Dr. Singh again reminds about the upcoming trial of Nikhil Gupta, charged in connection with the plot against Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon and other target other Sikh leaders, including Dr. Singh himself, has raised alarming questions about state-sponsored efforts to silence the Sikh diaspora. And Dr. Singh, he says, was among 5 potential targets warned by federal authorities. 3 of the 5, myself included, live in California. So 3 of these 5 potential targets are in California. Again, this is California, ordinary America, that is now being subject to the target of potential assassinations from India. It's quite shocking. These dangers are not theoretical, they are deadly. Canada expelled 6 senior Indian diplomats, including the High Commissioner himself, after Trudeau cited clear and compelling evidence connecting them to Najjar's assassination. Amit Shah, a member of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's cabinet, he's the Home Office Minister, was also implicated. Again, a high-level government Indian minister implicated in these attacks, these assassination attempts on American soil and North American soil. The US Justice Department charged Bhushan Athali with federal hate crimes for allegedly threatening employees of a Sikh non-profit organisation. And we did actually report on that. Dreadful threats at the time. This escalating violence reveals the growing peril Sikh Americans and their allies face from foreign threats. At the state level, the Californian legislature needs to enact the Transnational Repression Bill. Absolutely it does. That was introduced by Dr. Jesmeet Bains and Dee Delano. Additionally, we would welcome collaborating with local law enforcement to provide training and, of course, education on the unique challenges Sikh Californians face. And then he signs off the article, and this is absolutely right: no minority group should live in fear of foreign threat on American soil. Sikh Californians, more than 250,000 strong, are deeply committed to the democratic values that make this state flourish. Guided by our faith's principles and our ancestors' resilience, we envision a future where every Californian can live without fear and fully express their identity in the Golden State. And I think that basically, I mean, you could transfer that to Canada, to the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and of course Europe. Basically, contrast this with the actions of India. Ordinary Sikhs across the world want to live in a democratic, peaceful society. They want to practice their religion, they want to practice their politics and their political activism in peace without fear. Contrast that with India, who are now sending out paid assassins to kill their political opponents. That's what India gets up to, James. I think this article, again, it's just rehashing a lot of everything that we talk about on a daily basis, but what it does highlight very clearly is that ordinary Sikh people, Sikh families, are living in daily fear. Why should people live in fear of a foreign nation's assassins? That says it all about India.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, when you trace it back to the Home Minister being involved, I mean, Modi's right-hand man, Amit Shah, and, you know, what they can get up to is just beyond imagination, beyond the spy movies, beyond what we can really even write stories about. And but most of all, what's really important is that the Sikh community is finally getting vindication and validation because they've been talking about this for years. And now that it's in the limelight, it's so essential that people pay attention from reading the mainstream media to know what India's been up to, what they're capable of, and to put their foot down and put a stop to it. And, you know, I would like to see more nations really stepping up to the plate to hold India accountable more so than they have, namely the US and the UK, just speaking out more and holding Modi, you know, to the high standards that we would hold any other national leader to.
Indeed. And articles like this that are increasingly appearing across mainstream media are having this effect of bringing to the world's attention and just ordinary people's attention just what India is like as a state, as a government. And India are just becoming, they're just losing credibility on the world stage with actions that they've been up to. As I keep saying, it's a massive strategic mistake, this obsessive agenda to target the Khalistan campaign. It's really blown back in India's face. So, okay, talking about India, James, let's move across the Punjab, my second story. And this is This is a very particular story, and again, it's a very sad story, and it's another legacy of partition in 1947. The final resting place of the first Guru Nanak Ji, as it turned out, it fell after partition onto the Pakistan side of Punjab. And of course, Sikhs living in Punjab, on the Indian side of Punjab, still of course want to be able to travel to that very Gurdwara, the Guru Nanak Sahib, across the border in Pakistan to pay their respects and go through their devotion. Now, of course, Pakistan and India have had to come to some sort of arrangement to allow Sikhs in Indian Punjab to be able to cross across to the Gurdwara to do this. And of course, it's been a bit of an ongoing open wound almost since partition in 1947. And of course, since then, so what has happened is they established what's called the Kartarpur Corridor. And this corridor basically sits astride the river, and it is literally just a corridor that through which Sikhs living in Indian Punjab can cross over, visit the Gurdwara in Pakistan, and then travel back and not go through, shall we say, the normal protocols of crossing an international border. Well, it just turns out that this crossing and the protocols required have just been renegotiated by India and Pakistan, and as they've done it, they actually haven't consulted with the local Sikh community, the Sikh organisations, to ask them, well, what do you want? What sort of things do you want? And there's an article, and I'll quickly again just flick through this article just to highlight some of the issues of what's actually happened here. Now, demands that have been raised by the Sikhs in relation to the Kartarpur Sahib corridor have been totally ignored, as India and Pakistan renewed this agreement for another 5 years to operate the corridor that's a visa-free access to the final resting place of Guru Nanak Ji in Pakistan-administered Punjab. Now, the agreement was signed on the 24th of October 2019, the original agreement, to facilitate the visit of pilgrims from India to the Gurdwara Darbar Sahib Kartarpur in Narowal, over in Pakistan, through this corridor. And it was valid for 5 years, and it's just been extended for another 5 years until 2029. And it will allow an uninterrupted operation of the corridor for use by the pilgrims from India to visit the Holy Gurdwara in Pakistan. However, Sikhs were left disappointed as both countries didn't convene any bilateral meeting before renewing the pact and discussing the demands of the community. And the Sikhs have demanded that the condition of carrying passports shouldn't be imposed, basically because most of the pilgrims don't have passports. The process to get a passport is very difficult, it's long, it's bureaucratic, and to demand that pilgrims have passports is really unfair. But of course, the demands that this whole requirement for passports made by the Sikh community have been ignored. And India's secretary-level officials have said, after all this, as an international travel, passport conditions must be there. Pakistan, on the other hand, has said, look, we've got no problem. We don't need to impose this. It's come from India. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan formally announced when he was in power to exempt Sikh pilgrims from carrying passports. Imran Khan, back in 2019, said, no, Indian pilgrims don't need your passports. And then, as of October the 28th, the SGPC passed a resolution supporting that very same thing, saying that Sikh pilgrims should not need to carry a passport. However, the Indian government didn't demand bilateral talks to be held with the Sikh community. Instead, it just basically said, in view of the continued requests of pilgrims regarding the removal of a $20 service charge levied by Pakistan per pilgrim per visit, India is once again urged Pakistan to not levy any fee. They've just ignored the whole passport issue, and they've just asked Pakistan, who actually raised a $20 fee for every pilgrim, say, look, let's forget the passports. You still need passports, but in replacement for that, we'll ask Pakistan not to charge $20 per pilgrim. Now, Pakistan actually said, look, we don't need passports, but we do need to charge pilgrims $20 per pilgrim, primarily because they spent $17 million refurbishing the Gurdwara, building infrastructure to access the Gurdwara, and basically to benefit the pilgrims, to make it easier for the pilgrims to travel, which is actually fair enough, as it turns out. And And also, officials in Pakistan said that they're disappointed by the dwindling numbers of pilgrims being allowed to visit, as the quota given by Pakistan is 5,000 pilgrims a day. So Pakistan says, yep, you can come, you don't need to bring a passport, we will allow up to 5,000 pilgrims a day to come and visit the Gurdwara. As it turns out, numbers have been dwindling massively. This isn't because Sikhs are losing their faith, it's because it's become harder and harder. India have made it harder and harder to allow them to go visit the Gurdwara. What a surprise. And what India have done is they've built good infrastructure at the border so that it can display to the world's cameras and everything. Look what we're doing. We've built all this infrastructure across the border to make it easier for pilgrims to cross the border, but anywhere up to that border, they've not touched. And likewise, they've imposed this passport provision, knowing full well that so many Sikh pilgrims cannot afford or cannot go through the process of getting a passport. Basically, it's the Indian government trying to make it very difficult for Sikhs to go about their daily religion. And this article finalises with a paragraph saying the process of applying for the pilgrimage is very complicated. Indian agencies personnel first visit the house of the pilgrim for verification that leaves a negative impact on him or her. Many pilgrims are denied permission. Permission is granted just 2 or 3 days before the date of pilgrimage. So that's how hard it is to even go take the advantage of this corridor, is that firstly you've got to get an agency personnel to visit you at home to then give you permission. And even then, permission is only granted 2 or 3 days before you actually want to make your pilgrimage, a very difficult pilgrimage. So James, once again, it's just another subtle but very obvious imposition of the Indian state trying to make it very difficult to be a practicing Sikh in the Punjab.
Just another example of Sikh oppression that we see so commonplace by the BJP and the Modi government, and just another way to try and break down their freedoms of travel. And this is something that we see the India government doing quite frequently, is trying to increase the difficulty and the challenges for Sikhs to travel anywhere, and this is such an important historical and culturally significant location that they should have no problem visiting, and it just seems to be getting tougher and tougher to break them down, Angus.
Indeed, oppression takes many forms, and this one is a subtle one, but an effective one.
That's right.
And it's just another sign of India doing its damnedest and its hardest to try and destroy the Sikh community.
That's right.
Okay, my final story, let's just quickly zip through, and this is the latest update on Jaggi. Now, I interviewed Jaggi's brother Gurpreet Singh Johal recently, and he talked a lot about his huge ongoing efforts with the British government to try to force the British government to act about his brother. On Monday, it will be 7 years to the day that Jagtar Singh Johal will be arbitrarily detained by India under very questionable legislation, under what they class as anti-terrorism laws. And after 7 years, Jagtar Singh Johal has yet to be convicted of any crime. 7 years. The British government in those 7 years has been absolutely shamefully, appallingly failing in its duty to bring Jaggi home and to hold India to account. Now, Gurpreet has once again, fortunately, had an audience with David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary for the new Labour government. And I'll quickly flick through the BBC's story on this one. Obviously, most of the media have covered it. Again, it's reaching mainstream media, which is a great thing. And the BBC reported overnight that Gurpreet met the Foreign Secretary David Lammy in London. Gurpreet said that the meeting had been positive. Proof was in the pudding, though, regarding whether it would lead to his brother's release. David Lammy is the 5th Foreign Secretary Gurpreet Singh Johal has met about his brother's case. Gurpreet himself is a Labour councillor. Labour are now in government here in the UK. Gurpreet said, over the last 7 years, I've heard a lot of empty talk from previous Foreign Secretaries about my brother's case. After today's meeting, I'm a lot more hopeful that this new government will do what is right. David Lammy listened to what we had to say and the solutions that we proposed, unlike his predecessors. But the proof is in the pudding. And that means getting Jagtar out of prison and back to Dumbarton. That's his home in Scotland. Mr Lammy's predecessor as Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, urged the Indian government to speed up the case after meeting the family in February. Speaking at the time, Lord Cameron said, "I take incredibly seriously any case of a British citizen imprisoned in another country." Clearly he didn't. Dan Dolan, the Director of Advocacy and Policy at human rights organisation Reprieve, said the new Labour government should do better than the previous Conservative administration, and said the Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister both took strong principled positions on Jagtar's case in opposition, recognising that he is arbitrarily detained and saying the government should seek his release. We are calling on them to honour those commitments. They have an opportunity to do better than the last government and bring Jagtar home to his family in Dumbarton. Yes, Labour government of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, David Lammy, we are looking at you. You said an awful lot in opposition. You made a lot of big promises. I'm waiting for anything to be publicly said. We're waiting for results. Here's what Jaggy himself had to say about it. I'll just share this with you.
The reassurance we've been given, which is that Jagtar will always be on the agenda, whether it's the Prime Minister meeting his counterpart or the Foreign Secretary meeting his counterpart, which means that Jagtar will always be a topic on the agendas. Now, the previous government, we had to kind of force that to happen with the campaigning that we did. It took up 6 years before journalists were actually asking Rishi Sunak at the time, are you going to be raising Jagtar Singh Johal's case?
So that's Gurpreet talking to the UK's Channel 4 News last night. Right. And again, he remains very positive, very optimistic. He's pushing David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, and he's been, once again, given all these assurances and promises. Of course, Jaggy will be on the agenda. I hate to say it, I remain sceptical and cynical. We've seen British governments come into power over the last 7 years. We've seen various prime ministers, as he said, 7 foreign secretaries he has spoken to now. And again, each foreign secretary has made the same old promises. Yeah, of course he's on the agenda. Of course we won't stand for this. Here we are 7 years later. What's happened? Precisely nothing. So David Lammy, the spotlight is on you. And let's see if you are as good as your word. Personally, I remain cynical. I just lost any faith and trust in any British government to do anything about this. They do not have the courage, the guts, the proverbials to stand up to the Indian government and do anything about this. They only seem to be interested in trade deals. If you recall David Lammy's recent visit to meet his counterpart in India, all he came back and talked about was trade deals. All the other Labour MPs talked about were trade deals. The Labour MP for Dumbarton, the home constituency of Jaggy, all he talked about was, well, what did you come back with? What commercial agreements have you come back with, Mr Lammy? That's all they talked about. Jaggy was not mentioned once in Parliament. So unfortunately, as much as I hope to God that Gurpreet's pressure is going to have an impact, I remain deeply cynical. And it's to the British government's utter shame that Jagtar still remains, after 7 years, arbitrarily detained by a rogue government in India, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, I have nothing but respect for him fighting for his brother's release and just doing everything that he can while trying to keep a positive attitude. I've got brothers and I would move hell and earth to get them out of that type of situation. And the final thought on that, Angus, for me is whether or not that has a role in the UK's silence when it comes to speaking out about the transnational repression and the foreign interference by India, is if they are concerned if there are backroom deals being made to try to get Jaggy home. I could see where that would, that might derail those talks if they spoke out about the other issues.
Indeed, and the whole Jaggy issue is a thorn in the side of both India, but particularly the UK, because the UK is desperate to sign up a trade deal with India. And yeah, there'll be all sorts of backroom deals going on, but ultimately all that matters is that Jaggy is released. Who cares about trade deals? Great if we get one. Ultimately, all that matters to Gurpreet and his family and to those people in the community, and of course ordinary British citizens who care about our fellow British citizens, the only thing that matters is the results. And I don't care how many backroom deals are done as long as Jaggy is brought home. That's all that really matters. So we wish Gurpreet the very best of luck. We will be behind him every step of the way, and we will keep highlighting this shameful issue until Jaggy is finally brought home. So, James, on that note, let's move on to our comments section. And lots of lovely comments, as always. So thank you very much indeed to each and every one of you who has left a comment. Now, this is an interesting one. This is going off on a slight tangent. So this is a new direction in our comments that we haven't talked about in the past, actually, James. Master of Karatia said, of course, Punjab solution only Azadi Khalistan. Of course, the only solution for Sikhs in the Punjab is Khalistan, as we often say. Now, Guru Stock Investing says, only Jesus. Punjab will follow one and only true God, Jesus Christ. So clearly a Christian has entered the room. So welcome, Guru Stock Investing. Now, Mahesh Brar has responded saying, look, churches are empty in the West and many are sold. So that speaks for itself. And Guru Stock Investing comes back and says that's why the largest one in Asia is currently being built in Punjab. I didn't know this, actually. Also, people go to churches only on Sundays. It's not a holiday destination. The one being sold are done for the welfare of refugees. To which Mahesh Brar responds, churches sold are for refugees or no one goes there. Now, this is an interesting one, James, because what we've seen here in the West, and this is actually a very valid point, we've seen a massive decline in the Church of England and certainly the Christian church. Right. I would say, I'm no expert on this, but certainly what I have witnessed is certainly across the United Kingdom, many traditional churches are lying empty. The congregations are dwindling and the Christian faith does seem to be in massive decline. And these wonderful, beautiful old churches across the United Kingdom are standing almost empty. They're used periodically for marriages and christenings and the odd event, but the Sunday congregations are dwindling. What I am seeing is a massive growth in the new spin-off churches. It's almost like the new generation that have modernised. They have lots of live music. They've entered the 21st century, but the old style, what we call the Church of England Christianity, the real old, I call them the old dinosaurs, it's dying out. Right. They're not modernising. They haven't moved with the times. And I think this actually contrasts very interestingly about this the Sikh religion, which is, I would say, in very good health and is certainly growing, is that the old Christian faith here in the UK is in massive decline. The Archbishop of Canterbury has entered politics. He is the lead of the Church of England. He's entered politics and as a result is upsetting an awful lot of people who are leaving the Christian faith in droves. So, well, Jones, I don't know if you've witnessed that in Canada.
Absolutely. And one of the historically hotspots for Christianity, Catholicism, and other religions in Canada was Montreal, of course, and Quebec as a whole, very religious province of Canada. And there are numerous churches that are just sitting in disrepair. They are closed off and basically just dilapidated. Angus, we see a big drop in people of faith and following faith in Canada. One of the few religious groups that are seeing an increase, of course, is Sikhi. So very interesting.
Yeah, and it's sad in many ways because certainly in this country, we've got churches that are 1,000 years old or more, and they're just sitting there falling into disrepair because they're just not being used. And people, the Church of England saying, what can we do with these buildings? And the community saying we must not lose these buildings because apart from just the historical heritage that they form, they are beautiful old buildings that must not be lost. But unfortunately, the Church of England, in my opinion, has lost its way in a massive way. And it's actually being superseded by these new Christian churches that are springing up, and certainly America, and I'm sure those in our American audience will have opinions on this. It's a massive industry, these new churches that are springing up, these offshoots of Christianity that are taking Christianity in different directions. They are the ones where the growth is being seen and massive investments. Of course, it's a huge industry, commercial industry as well. So, yeah, an interesting topic. Thanks for bringing that up in the comments section. That's almost subject of a whole show in itself. Gurpreet. Well, here you go, Gurpreet. People of Canada, please kindly sign that petition. Absolutely. Well, I hope, Gurpreet, we've done our bit here on the show for you, James.
I sure hope so. And let's get that information circulating to more people around the globe. Let's make that go viral.
Get out there, get it signed, and most importantly, get others. Talk to your local communities. Stick it in your local Facebook groups. Get everybody out there, get it signed. Joyride, we all democratic people would love to visit Khalistan. Yeah. We'd love to visit Khalistan or migrate to Khalistan, not to RSS India, never. Well, yeah, absolutely. We all want to go visit Khalistan when it happens. But actually, and again, I keep saying this, India, I still love India and I still want to visit India. RSS India, what we need to do is drive the RSS out of India, the rest of India itself. Because they're the ones that are destroying this nation as a nation. And I think it's incumbent on all Indian nationals, Hindus, Christians, Muslims, drive out the RSS. They're the people destroying your nation, that are holding your nation back. They're the they're the community that's imposing the caste system on you. It's the caste system that is doing so much damage, that's keeping so many in India in effective enslavement. That's what needs to be driven out of India. So please turn your attention on the RSS and Hindutva. They are the enemy of the Indian people. Right, here's a big one, James. Preteen Dillon said, and I'll quickly try and pick out the salient points in this comment, because a lot of important points in here. Now, the Punjab has been run by central government since partition. Profit of the Punjab, and this is the economic argument saying the Punjab generates all this wealth that goes back to Delhi, but it's seeing nothing or very little in return. This in itself is a reason why Punjab should go independent, why Khalistan should happen. Absolutely right. And of course, talks about the agricultural argument. Many Sikhs have died after loss of money or losing their farms. Again, we go back to the farmers' protest. The root of the farmers' protest is that central government are imposing these laws essentially to drive small farmers in Punjab out of business so that the corporate farmers can come in and that Modi's friends can come and take control of the Punjab's farmland. And also talking about this influx of Biharis and those from Uttar Pradesh, the Hindus. And again, it's following this Chinese model of Tibet, where it's essentially colonizing the Punjab by pouring in Hindus from other regions who buy up land, who also, and this point is brought out here in this comment, are interbreeding with the local Sikh community. And the outcome of that over generations is that, and as Preteen Dillon points out here, is that indigenous Punjabis in the old days, and that's a loose definition, but certainly generations ago, were very obvious in the way they looked, in their DNA. They looked like Punjabis. But what Preteen Dillon's saying is that this influx of Hindus from elsewhere is actually is diluting the indigenous DNA and is actually creating a new generation and new generations of intermixed genetics, which is diluting the indigenous Punjabi DNA. So ultimately, the indigenous Punjabis are not going to look like Punjabis did, several generations ago. So I think, and again, we don't have time to go into every point raised in here, but I think the central salient points in your comments here is this is very much a deliberate tactic of the RSS and the Hindu Rashtra ideal is to undermine indigenous Punjabi populations and the whole community and the commerce of the Punjab by bringing in Hindus, interbreeding Hindus with the local indigenous population. Exactly what's happening in Tibet by the Chinese. That's how, over a couple of generations, you take over, you colonize, and you take control of a state. That's what's happening in the Punjab, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's similar to the Canadian, what we call the equalization payments, where the provinces have to put into the federal coffers. But the difference being is that the provinces actually see money back, unlike India, where a lot of it is kept in the centralized system.
Indeed. So, but thank you for that comment. And it was, I think it brought out a lot of, well, it just summarised a lot of important points that we talked about in the past.
Absolutely.
Right, final set of comments. Freddie Mercury, excellent reporting. Well, thank you. Genuinely sorry to hear about the circumstances. Thank you for your condolences, much appreciated. We're grateful for your dedication in countering the intensified India propaganda efforts. Absolutely, James. We have had to redouble our efforts because, of course, the social media and the mainstream media have been absolutely inundated since Trudeau stood up, well, certainly for at least a year since Trudeau stood up and blamed India for what's happened. Of course, the IT cells have been massively active over this last 12 months, and particularly over the last 2 or 3 weeks, when the evidence was finally presented of what India had been up to and how high up the Indian government ladder it goes, is of course they've been inundating media all the way around the world with anti-Trudeau propaganda, anti-Western propaganda and pro-Modi propaganda. So unfortunately, we've, as a response, we've had to redouble our efforts, have we not, James, to try and counter that false narrative and bring the truth to our audience.
Absolutely. And as a member of, the International Federation of Journalists, the CWA Canada, the Canadian Freelance Guild, I make sure that all of what I report is at the highest level of ethics, integrity, and of course, following the best practices of journalism. So, I'm proud to be a part of this with Angus to bring the truth out.
Indeed, and a lovely couple of comments here from Jorai and Amric that said, they've missed us. My friends didn't hear from you from the last few days. Miss you when you don't come. Thank you for that. Obviously, we would only ever be away if we absolutely had to. We move heaven and earth to bring you the show on a daily basis. Yeah. It's very important for us that we do keep bringing you the show. If we're not here, it is obviously always for a very good reason, an unavoidable reason. And Amric's comment, your grasp of how the Hindu mind works is amazing. Well, I would never be so presumptuous as to understand the Hindu mind, but we do our best to interpret it, do we not, James?
Absolutely we do.
And final comment of the day, Sikhs only safe in India if they get their free land of Khalistan. Well, I couldn't put it better. We always like to finish the show on a positive note, and you're absolutely right, Jagtar Singh Johal, that Sikhs really genuinely will only be safe in the subcontinent, in their own sovereign territory of Khalistan. And we will do our absolute utmost to bring that joyous day to reality. And I have no doubt it is on the cards, it is coming. We just have to keep pushing very hard and keep that momentum going. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. We must bring the show to a close once again for the day. But thank you so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in. We've had lots of lovely comments, and we love, of course, to talk about them. We still enjoy your critical comments. If you are a counter-narrative speaker, get it in there. We've had some wonderfully critical comments and wonderful comments disagreeing with what we say. If you disagree with us, please let us know. It always just gives us a great opportunity to have a great debate with you. Do, of course, keep your comments coming directly to our email. That is message@satellitetv.com. Thank you to all our correspondents who have emailed us. That is all very much appreciated. Unfortunately, we must draw things to a close. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks so much for watching. We will see you next time.